Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina. Let us take a look at the elements of this very long name. Giovanni is the composer's first name. It is the Italian name for John. Pierluigi is his surname or his family name. Da means from, and Palestrina is the city of his birth. Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina is one of those composers who is not referred to by his first name, as is Josquin, not by his surname, as is Dufay, but rather by his place of birth. He is simply called Palestrina. Palestrina lived from around 1525 through 1594, so his life effectively spans the last 3/4 of a certain century. In terms of hundreds, that would be the last 3/4 of the 1500s. In terms of centuries, that would be the last 3/4 of the 16th century. Although Palestrina is often referred to as being Italian, please know that Italy as we know it today did not exist as a country before the mid-1800s. Palestrina is easy to distinguish from the first two composers in this unit, not only because of his place of origin, but in terms of his career. Palestrina started out as an organist in his native Palestrina. Once his considerable talents were recognized, he was then employed as a singer-composer in the Papal Chapel in Rome. The Papal Chapel is the Pope's private chapel, and during the 16th century, those who were employed in it were very highly paid, and Palestrina thus obtained one of the best jobs in the entire musical world. Although all the popes for whom Palestrina worked liked him and admired his music, Palestrina was fired from that institution during the 1560s. In fact, he was fired because it was the 1560s. Think about it. The Council of Trent completed its meetings in the 1560s, and one of their concerns was separating the sacred from the secular, and the reigning pope at that time, Pope Paul IV, wanted to set an example for the rest of Catholic Christianity. So in his own household, he employed only those persons who were members of the religious, monks, nuns, priests, and so on. Palestrina, because he was a married man, was not eligible to be employed in the Papal Chapel, so he was dismissed. When his wife died a few years later, Palestrina actually considered becoming a priest so that he could go back to his old job at the Papal Chapel. But instead he did what many wise men throughout the ages have chosen to do. That is, he married a wealthy widow, and she was very wealthy indeed. Her husband was in one of the best businesses you could be in during the 16th century, the fur trade, and so Palestrina basically went into the fur trade, and he made more money at it than he or his wife had before that time. Palestrina was thus in a position to do something that most 16th century composers could only dream of. That is, he was able to have all of his music printed, at least all of the music that he wanted to print during that time. I should point out that most of the music published during the 16th century was actually stolen from the composers, and very often the works that were printed did not come out in the best possible editions, and they did not reflect well sometimes on the quality of their composers' achievements. Palestrina, therefore, was able to get around this and to produce extremely accurate copies of his compositions. The fact that his works were so well preserved and available for public inspection, in combination with his considerable talent as a composer, probably accounts for the fact that he became the first musical classic. A classic is something that does not go out of style, and Palestrina is the first composer in the West to have had his music continuously performed from his lifetime right up to the present. In fact, not only has Palestrina's work been performed continuously since his lifetime, but it has also been studied continuously since his lifetime. Every music student today has studied the works of Palestrina. And if that isn't enough, Palestrina is the first composer to have had his music continuously imitated from his lifetime right up to the present. Indeed, every well-educated musician anywhere in the world today has been taught how to write compositions in the style of Palestrina. In fact, being able to write a work in the style of Palestrina is often a requirement for obtaining a degree. It is a part of the testing process. One does it on the spot along with other examinations. Palestrina actually became something of a legend after his death, and in fact, right up until recent decades, he was the subject of a very interesting legend. Let's consider what this legend is all about. You have at hand an illustration of the frontispiece of the composer's first book of masses that was published during the 1550s. In it, you can see a depiction of the composer who is kneeling at the feet of the Pope and offering him a book of music. The 1550s was the time that the Council of Trent had turned its attention to sacred music, and it was the time when they were actually considering abolishing polyphony in church music. This coincidence, Palestrina's presenting a book of masses to the Pope at a time when the Council of Trent was considering abolishing polyphony in church music, but then it didn't, gave rise to this legend. Indeed, for a very long time, up until just a few decades ago in serious scholarly circles, Palestrina was actually supposed to be the savior of polyphony in church music during the time of the Council of Trent. Although you will see this story printed as gospel truth in textbooks and in reference books, please know that this is just a legend.